What city will you never visit based on its reputation? Egyptians. Here we go again. Any woman who goes to Egypt, here I won't go again. I lived in Cairo for 2 years in my 30s, and I genuinely hated it. I was sexual harassed every day. At one point I had to move house because the gas man kept banging on my door shouting that I was a prostitute and should let him in for sex. When I left Cairo, I looked out of the plane window and thought, I'm never coming back here again. I don't know what's wrong with it, but apparently Gary, Indiana, holy fuck, why did this get almost 10k upvotes? Thanks everyone. Imagine a shitty run-down street. The roads aren't repaired, most shops are shuttered. There are car husks just left in parking spaces, windows are broken and replaced with boards. The people you see look like a combination of homeless and junkie and like they want to both rape and eat you. It's like that but the whole town. Mogadishu. The State Department page for travel to Mogadishu is a wild ride. Some of my favorite excerpts. Draft a will and designate appropriate insurance beneficiaries and/or power of attorney. Discuss a plan with loved ones regarding care, custody of children, pets, property, belongings, non-liquid assets, collections, artwork, etc. Funeral wishes, etc. Be sure to appoint one family member to serve as the point of contact with hostage takers, media, U.S. and host country government agencies, and members of Congress if you are taken hostage or detained. Establish a proof of life protocol with your loved ones, so that if you are taken hostage, your loved ones can know specific questions and answers to ask the hostage takers to be sure that you are alive, and to rule out a hoax. Greater than the U.S. State Department and most Western nations advise that you avoid all travel to Mogadishu for any reason. Continuous activity by the Al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorist group, Al-Shabaab, has resulted in numerous kidnappings, suicide bombings and generalized chaos. There is a particular terrorist threat to foreigners in places where large crowds gather and Westerners frequent, including airports, government buildings, hotels, and shopping areas. In 2016, there were 14 documented attacks directed at hotels, restaurants, and the international airport in Mogadishu. Independent travel to Mogadishu will most likely result in your death. Greater than independent travel to Mogadishu will most likely result in your death. Wow, I've never seen travel warnings this clear. Props to them for not mincing words. Dubai, not a fan of 120 degrees with nearly 100% humidity. And slave labor and oil dystopia. Agreed, I also really like my human rights. Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I work with so many refugee families who fled from there and the stories are chilling. I went there in 2011 as a nursing student to help out at one of the hospitals. Great friendly people, but the state of pretty much everything was absolutely shocking. Everything was in disrepair. Tons of buildings were still complete rubble from the earthquake in 2010. Raw sewage appeared to be flowing out onto some of the streets, no traffic lights worked, potholes were so large they'd swallow your entire vehicle, etc. Our fun time consisted of going to the UN base. There were also frequent power outages throughout the day. The entire hospital was surrounded by concrete walls that were probably 7 to 8 feet high, followed by barbed wire that was another 5 feet high and was manned by men with guns. We were not allowed to go out into the streets, ever. Some of the cases coming through there were absolutely heartbreaking. A baby died after another hospital had given it so much cough, cold meds it stopped breathing. We were also told that some of the other local hospitals did not have staff at nighttime and patients were left alone by themselves. I learned a lot and met some fantastic people though. It made me realize how good we have it in Canada. From current reports, those are the good old days. Things are much worse now. The government has almost completely failed and is begging for outside intervention. Rival gangs are engaging in warfare on the streets, gunfire and burning houses of rivals. Cholera outbreaks are even more out of control. Hospitals have no medicine or power. One report I saw, black market fuel smugglers got stopped by the police and had fuel taken because it's the only way they could get gas because the government is so broken that it can't get gas into the city. Something like 70% of Haitians have insufficient food and are regularly not eating for days at a time. I forget the UN technical designation, but food conditions are one step below outright famine. There's a town way north of Perth where I live in Western Australia called Wittenoom, that I would refuse to step foot anywhere near, purely because of the history of it and the asbestos exposure risks. I have no idea how there are still people living there, let alone the hundreds of tourists that go through there on their travels in the north. Edit. Nice to know that the last people living there are now gone. Cairo. Apparently one of the worst places in the world to go if you're a tourist. At least, if people on Reddit I've seen complaining are to be believed. I had a horrible time with my stomach, and the one camel ride I took the guy held my boob saying he was studying me. Pyongyang. If I went, I couldn't complain. Tip: sort by controversial to find your city. Port-au-Prince not being murdered is my favorite thing. Gallup, New Mexico according to truck drivers. Storytime. I live in Albuquerque and I played rugby in high school. We went to Gallup to play exactly one time. We had to walk the field to pick out glass and needles out of the dirt. It was awful. Probably Riften. Too many sketchy people. They also have the Thieves Guild to worry about, not to mention Maven Blackbriar. All of Qatar. Glares in FIFA. Gary, Indiana. Honestly, because of the reputation I want to see Gary sometime, not to stay, but to drive through. There's just something about urban decay that I love to look at. Abandoned office buildings, old rusted blast furnaces, empty lots in the middle of downtown, it's all morbidly beautiful to me. It's the semi-apocalyptic atmosphere that does it for me. Like being able to see what the world might look like if people went to extinct. I also really like old abandoned malls for that reason. Something about a place that was once full of life and people but has now been reduced to a dilapidated rundown husk is so interesting and tragic to me. Guadalajara, Mexico. I work for a large software dev company that has a delivery center in Guadalajara. We've had to go as far as employing private security services to establish a safe zone for employees due to kidnapping attempts and general random violent incidents. Edit. Thank you all for the upvotes, this was unexpected. I just wanted to thank everyone who has contributed their positive experiences with Guadalajara. I would also like to clarify that I am not trying to discourage people from going to visit. The issues that have led me to not wanting to go to Guadalajara can definitely be mitigated to some degree by tourists and travelers with street smarts, good planning, and good awareness of their surroundings. That being said, the business environment struggles to do this somewhat. In international orgs that have hundreds of offices and multiple large delivery centers all over the world, the demand for 24/7 work from office availability to combat time zone differences dictates how employees have to interact with their environment. This increases potential threat surfaces in a significant way. We also are unfortunately actively targeted by criminal organizations, which creates challenges more unique than just petty crime when you have criminal entities with so much power. Forks, Wa. Place is full of emo vampires and werewolves. For those who wish to know, Forks is an old logging town, ran by a single logging company. And much like Gary, Indiana, when the company left, so too did the jobs and income of the region. Twilight and its legion of fans actually turned the fortunes of that town around, and to this day they still do tours of all the places mentioned in the books and movies. If you are not a fan of Twilight, then there's not much in the actual town to see or do, but it's on the outer edge of Olympic National Park, which is honestly one of the best NPs in the entire country, so there is a reason to be in the area. Any remaining sundown towns? I was looking up sundown towns in my state and came across one town close by. It seems like the sundown status died out, but the story they had was too funny. Brookfield, Illinois. During the 1960s, there was a big uproar when a family sold a house to a black family. It turned out, however, that there already was a black family in the town, and at a meeting called to protest this new family, a white man stood up and said his neighbor already was black. The meeting broke up in confusion. Gotta love it, we'd like to keep black folks out, probably a lot worse than that, they're already here, Ted. Well shit, guess we lost. Oh well, the entire town gives up on racism. I have a funny Los Angeles story. For the record, I'd happily visit again. I was taking a cross-country train into LA. As we entered the city, a little girl loudly asked her parents, "Where are we?" "We're in Los Angeles." "Well, why don't they clean it up?" The whole train car erupted in laughter. Derry or Castle Rock, Maine. Not a fan of that derriere? I think it was all of those missing children that happened 27 years apart like clockwork. All of this first world countries reasoning none of us third world folks can even relate to. First world folks. Nah bro, stay the fuck away from Gary, Indiana, bunch of crackheads. Dubai just feels eerie, third world dudes. Yeah, you wanna stay the fuck away from Mexicali. I once saw a dude eating a human eye. Don't even go near Ciudad de Deus, man. I once saw a 7-year-old prostitute herself in Cali, man. All these are real cases. Sentinel Island. But what if they really need Jesus? Dubai. Disgustingly wealthy. No desire to visit. Oil and modern slavery will do that. As a resident of NC, never going to Fayetteville. Fayetteville is what happens outside every mill base everywhere. Pawn shops, strip clubs, used car dealers, tattoo shops, etc. stacked on every inch of road near base. Outside that, cheap houses because we used to pay soldiers shit. Eventually it accidentally turns into a city. East St. Louis, Illinois. Quite a few. Basically any city in a country where it's legal to execute people for being gay. I prefer to not give any of my money to these places as a tourist. Mogadishu. One friend was murdered and his murderer set free by his clan. Another colleague was kidnapped from their guest house 5 years ago now and is still missing. Will never, ever, step one tiny toe in that city, let alone the country of Somalia. Ciudad Juarez. I grew up there. Violent crime is mostly among people who are into drug traffic, especially in the last few years. The issue with the city is frankly, it doesn't have much to do. A couple of museums, a beautiful theater and a big park, half of which is closed, are hardly things people actually flock to see. You can pretty much get that anywhere in the world, and B, the infrastructure is terrible, as it's extremely car-centric and uncared for. In other words, you are more likely to be run down by a car in the terribly designed Torres Avenue than you are of being kidnapped, and the uncared for buildings are not a thrilling sight to behold. Honestly? Dubai. Fuck that place. Basically a rich person playground, not to mention the slaves. Juarez, Mexico. Bad news down there. Had a co-worker go down there with his wife to be in order to deal with some immigration issues. He got cornered by a bad group of guys, they took his new truck, then held him for ransom 5 months before finally letting him go. Slew. The first UK city I've seen on this thread, and it's not even a dangerous place, it's just boring. I have no desire to go to Oklahoma City, it looks kinda boring and flat. Tulsa on the other hand I've heard is kinda unique and quirky. I hear it is okay. Winchester, Indiana. Never been there, but I'm not far across the border in Ohio, and I've met people from there. They are, without exception, the most mean, hateful people I have ever encountered. I am shocked to see Chicago so much. I live in the west suburbs and haven't really been anywhere else. Didn't know its reputation compared with other cities was so bad. Chicago is beautiful, it's not like tourists are going to be going to the slums. The parks, towers, etc. everyone wants to see are perfectly okay to visit. The only warning I'd offer is against pickpockets. Gary, Indiana. Dubai, and basically all the other Gulf cities. Ultimate facade over authoritarianism. Neom, but it will never exist. Caracas, Venezuela. I've heard that if you hear motorcycles, it's either gangs or cops, either way, you're getting robbed, or kidnapped.